For 50 years, a pharmacist ran a shop in Western Germany called the Tiger Apotheker. Local obituaries marked his death in January 2015 as the passing of a well-liked figure in the community. None of them mentioned that he had once destroyed more than 100 enemy tanks. Twice the German army told Otto Carius he was not fit to serve. He had been born in Zweibrücken, a small Palatinate town near the French border, on May 27, 1922. And when he presented himself at the recruitment office in 1940, he was turned away on medical grounds both times, too light. His father, a schoolteacher and reserve officer, had some sympathy with the decision, having already described tanks as metal death traps, a remark Carius recalled years later in his memoirs, Tigers in the Mud. A third application in May 1940 finally got him through the medical board. The army placed Carius in the 104th Infantry Replacement Battalion, where he spent several weeks before submitting a transfer request to the Panzer Corps. He was accepted and sent to Putlos in Holstein, where he trained with the 7th Panzer Replacement Battalion. When that unit was integrated into the 21st Panzer Regiment and ordered east, Carius went with it. By June 1941, he was inside the Soviet Union with the first wave of Operation Barbarossa. He was 18 years old. His vehicle for the first 2 years of the Eastern Campaign was a Panzer 38T, a Czech-designed light tank armed with a 37mm gun and thin side armor. It had been adequate against Polish and French forces in the early war, but against the Soviet T-34 and the heavier armored vehicles the Red Army deployed after 1941, its limitations were severe. Carius worked his way from loader to tank commander in its cramped interior, learning the fundamentals of armored combat through some of the most unforgiving conditions of the war. His tank was hit multiple times during operations in 1941 and 42, and he was evacuated for treatment more than once. Each time he returned to the front. By late 1942, Carius had completed an officer training course and returned to the 21st Panzer Regiment as a commissioned platoon leader. He had served through the most grueling period of the Eastern Campaign in an outclassed vehicle, and the experience had made him a methodical and patient tank commander. A transfer in January 1943 brought him to the 500th Replacement Battalion, and there, for the first time, he stood beside a Tiger I, a 57-ton vehicle with an 88mm gun that could reach Soviet armor at ranges no T-34 could answer. After 2 years in a Panzer 38T, the difference was not subtle. In April 1943, he was assigned as platoon leader to the 2nd Company of the 502nd Heavy Panzer Battalion, one of the first Tiger units on the Eastern Front. The battalion was heading north, toward the siege lines around Leningrad, and Carius was heading with it. One night in the autumn of 1943, Carius's company held a village on the Leningrad front against an attacking Soviet armored force. The Russians did not know an entire Tiger company was waiting inside. Carius described what followed in his memoir. Muzzle flashes moving through the tree line, tank after tank shifting position in the dark, closing on a road at the far end of the village. He radioed his crews to hold fire and hold position. When a T-34 came within 50 meters of one of his Tigers, the crew took it with a single shot. The Russians, still uncertain what they were facing, broke off the attack. No Tigers were lost. That discipline, hold, observe, let the enemy commit before responding, became the signature of how Carius fought. The 502nd's operational area in the Leningrad sector was unforgiving terrain. Pine forests, frozen marshland, narrow roads that channeled armor into predictable lines of advance. Carius learned to use that terrain as a force multiplier, placing Tigers in positions where their long-range 88mm gun rendered the ground between him and the enemy a killing zone that Soviet tank commanders could not cross without warning. Through the second half of 1943 and into early 1944, his company moved between crisis points along the Army Group North's front. The Tiger's mechanical reliability remained a constant problem. Final drives failed, bridges collapsed under the weight, spare parts arrived weeks late. Carius wrote that crew discipline and maintenance habits often mattered more than tactical brilliance, because a Tiger that couldn't move was no Tiger at all. His company kept more vehicles operational than most, and the results showed in the engagement tallies. In the spring of 1944, the 502nd was committed in the Battle of Narva, a grinding defensive struggle in Estonia where German forces held a narrow bridgehead against sustained Soviet pressure. The enemy now deployed IS-2 heavy tanks, armed with a 122mm gun, capable of defeating the Tiger's frontal armor at close range. The engagements were no longer one-sided. On May 4, 1944, Carius received the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross for his performance as platoon leader in the 2nd Company. He was 21 years old. By early July 1944, the Soviet summer offensive, Operation Bagration, had shattered Army Group Center to the south and was driving armored columns west along the Baltic Highway toward Latvia. Dunaburg, a key rail and road hub on the Daugava River, was suddenly under direct threat. The 502nd was ordered to move, and Carius's company was directed toward the town. Soviet armor had already reached the roads north of Dunaburg before the Tigers arrived. On July 22, 1944, Carius led his second company, 8 Tiger Is, toward the village of Malinava, northeast of Dunaburg, where Soviet armor had cut the main supply road and halted the withdrawal of the 290th Infantry Division. Rather than commit all 8 tanks to a road he had not reconnoitred, Carius left 6 Tigers in reserve and moved forward with only his own vehicle and that of his wingman, Albert Kirscher. The attack began at approximately 1300 hours. German after-action reports signed by Battalion Commander Major Hans-Joachim Schwaner credited the 2-tank assault with destroying 17 enemy vehicles, including IS-2 heavy tanks, and clearing the road within 20 minutes. No Tigers were lost. That evening, the Oak Leaves to his Knight's Cross were recommended. They were formally awarded on July 27, 1944. The battle made Carius's name, but historians have since examined it carefully. Soviet archival research published by military analyst Peter Samsonov in 2019 identified the tanks engaged at Malinava by serial number and found the confirmed Soviet losses to be lower than the German after-action figures. Samsonov also established that no unit called the 1st Tank Brigade Joseph Stalin, as named in Tigers in the Mud, appears in Soviet orders of battle records for that date. The gap between memoir and archive is not unusual for armoured engagements, where claiming multiple crews often counted the same vehicle. The battle itself is not in dispute. The road was cleared, the infantry division extracted, and Carius received Germany's second-highest decoration for it. 2 days later, on July 24, 1944, his war on the Eastern Front ended on a dirt track outside a Latvian village. Carius had dismounted to reconnoiter on foot when Soviet soldiers ambushed the position. He was shot through the leg, the arm, twice in the back, and once in the neck before his Tigers arrived and drove the attackers off. A field medic found him still alive. He was evacuated and spent months in hospital. By early 1945, recovered but unable to return to the 502nd, Carius was transferred to the Western Front as company commander of the 2nd Company, 512th Heavy Anti-Tank Battalion. The unit was training on Jager Tigers, 70-ton tank destroyers armed with a 128mm gun, the heaviest anti-tank weapon deployed by any army in the war. On March 8, 1945, without completing that training, the company was ordered to the front near Seeburg to help defend the Rhine. On April 15, 1945, surrounded in the Ruhr Pocket, the company surrendered to the United States Army. Carius was 22 years old. When American forces processed Carius through the prisoner of war system in the spring of 1945, he was a decorated lieutenant with 6 wounds, a handful of personal effects, and no clear future. He was repatriated to a Germany that had been divided, bombed flat in places, and stripped of the institutions that had defined his adult life. He was 23. The question of what came next was one that millions of young German men were answering at the same time, in very different ways. Carius enrolled at the University of Heidelberg and chose pharmacy. He qualified and began working as a pharmacist in 1952. In 1956, he took over an existing pharmacy in Hirschweiler-Petersheim, a village of a few thousand people in Rhineland-Palatinate, and renamed it the Tiger Apotheker, the Tiger Pharmacy. The name was the only public acknowledgement he made of his wartime service in those early years. He stocked medicines, served customers, and built a business in a community that knew him as a pharmacist first and a veteran second, if at all. In 1960, he published Tigers in the Mud, Tiger im Schlamm, a memoir covering his combat career from 1941 to 1945. The book was initially released by a small military publisher and found a modest audience in West Germany. Over the following decades, it spread steadily, eventually appearing in 17 languages. The book found readers across Europe and beyond, studied as a practical text on small unit tactics and crew discipline, and cited by military historians as a primary source on Tiger operations. By the time the 6th edition had appeared, it had become one of the most widely read personal accounts of armored warfare ever written, not because of what Carius had achieved, but because of how plainly he described it. The memoir also brought unexpected creative attention. Between December 1998 and May 1999, the Japanese animator and filmmaker Hayao Miyazaki adapted Tigers in the Mud into a watercolor manga serialized in the magazine Model Graphics, running to 6 episodes. Miyazaki had spent much of his career examining the relationship between human beings and the machines they build to destroy each other. And in Carius's account, he found something rare in a war memoir, a man who recorded his own mistakes alongside his victories, and who wrote about the enemy with something closer to professional respect than contempt. For a pharmacist in a village of 3,000 people, it was an unusual footnote. Carius ran the Tiger Apotheke until 2011, when he was 88 years old. In later interviews, he was candid about his wartime kill count, stating that he believes his confirmed total was closer to 100 than the figure of 150 that appeared in official records, since he had not personally counted victories made as a commander rather than a gunner. He died on January 24, 2015 in Hirschweiler-Pettersheim and was buried in the local cemetery. The Tiger Apotheke sign was still above the door. If you found this video insightful, watch What Happened to German Tanks After World War II next. Like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell for more history inside. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.